Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Above the Tree Line, where we answer your questions about faith, Christianity, and culture. We have a very special guest with us today. If you did not hear her interview several episodes ago, please go back and listen to it. We have the wonderful, beautiful, talented Linda Eyett. Deacon Linda Eyett.
Leader.
And Will's here.
And Will.
And Will.
I'm going to do
Pastor
nothing
Will
today. I'm outgunned and outnumbered on this one.
Senior
for
Pastor
sure.
Will Davis Jr. Okay, so the reason that we wanted to bring you back, Linda, first of all, your testimony is crazy powerful. The path that you've walked to get where you are today, I've heard from women all over about how powerful your testimony was. And there was a piece of your testimony that we didn't get to dive into too much because honestly, there's so much content there. But one of the things that I wanted to bring you back and talk to you more about was the abortion piece.
Yes.
So this is a very sensitive topic. I do want to just cover this whole conversation just with grace.
Yeah.
There's a lot of women who have walked in similar shoes. There's no condemnation in this conversation. I just want to have a very open conversation about abortions,
Yes.
both for women who elect to have them, and just kind of the general stigma around if you're like pro-life, pro-choice. And I don't think there's anyone really better to weigh in on it than you.
Yeah.
So for those who did not hear your testimony, can you just, there's not really a Cliff's Notes version, but you did have an abortion.
You had two abortions
abortions
before I was 21 years of age. I was a young single mom with no child support and just did not feel like I could take on anything else. I was the poor, I was the broken, I was all of those things. And it was my dad and my mom and my stepmom at that time who really that was my lifeline. I did not know who God was. I did not have a relationship with him. So you're walking in the thoughts that you hear, and I mentioned that you don't feel worthy, right? Mm-hmm. And back then, back in the early 80s, I'm a young single mom. So it was very hard, and I made a choice that, I can't undo. At the time, I did not want to tell my parents, again, I was pregnant. I did not want to go on welfare, nothing against it. There are families that I feel that because of certain situations that we've seen, that they need that help. And if you need it, my gosh, we want you to take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be able to take care of myself and my child.
So you had one child.
Yes.
Already.
Yes, my son he was barely a year and a half old.
So you elected to have the first abortion, and then when it came time for the second one, was it kind of the same reasonings? It was
same situation.
There wasn't a father, financial.
Yes.
This was in the 80s. Was it easier back then or more difficult back then to have access to abortions?
Let me say this. So I didn't even know what that word meant at first. And when I was pregnant with my son, my parents were freaked out because I just barely turned 17. And they were like, you can't have this baby. Now, fast forward, that baby was born, and Joe was the first grandchild, and my parents loved him.
Mm-hmm.
Loved him.
He's a great young man today. He's an amazing young man.
He's an amazing young man. And he married a single mama too. So, but I knew I had to have him. I knew that did not, but it existed back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I remember my dad saying, well, our health insurance will pay for it. And I said, I don't even know what that is. But back in the 80s, early 80s, like this would have been 1982. Mm. And I said, no, I'm going to have this baby. I'm going to get married. And it was just, it was a bad marriage. We were young and dumb. But when it came again, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And the gentleman, the father of that unborn child, he said, "Well, just go get an abortion." And I was young.
So
And again-
almost very flippantly, like
Yeah.
just, when you were going through this, did you identify like being pregnant that you were like, you actually had a child, or is
No.
it's just like there's cells growing?
It was numb and I was scared.
Okay.
You don't think about cells. When you're 19 years old, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking, I'm a single mom. I'm making maybe $3.75 an hour was minimum wage back then. And I have to pay for diapers. I have to pay for rent. I have to take care of this baby. And you don't think about that. You're just, I mean, I had nobody to help me
Yeah.
take care of him at night. It was me and
Yeah.
him. So
And you probably thought you were doing the right thing for Joe too, because
Well,
it was
I
like
did.
it would be I mean, I can see how you would think it would be like an injustice to bring in another infant when you're already caring.
I was
for one.
surviving.
Yeah.
I was barely surviving, financially, emotionally, everything. And that relationship ended as well. And then fast forward, you know,
Yeah, the story ends well.
yeah. The story ends well, but the beginning chapters are they're just sad. So, you know, I'm going to say this. So I have walked in those shoes twice. And I also had a miscarriage. And there's a couple of verses, and I'm not going to remember exactly where they are, but I've shared them before. And the first one is, of course, there's now no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus, right?
Romans 8:1, it's my favorite.
Yeah.
Mine too.
Thank God for that verse.
Yeah, no kidding.
Judge ye not lest you've been judged. Do not judge somebody till you've walked a mile in their shoes, right? What's the other one about removing the plank from your eye?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Pointing out the
Yeah,
speck
it's
in
yeah.
your.
But then my favorite that really brings it home is, for I will redeem and restore all that the locusts have destroyed in your life. And that restoration is what happens after Christ. Before Christ, I did not know, that woman did not know Jesus. She did not know who God was. She knew that he was somewhere there, but she didn't believe that he would love her. She could not go into a church. In fact, one of the churches, I talked to one of my dear friends who's Catholic, and I said, you know, I didn't even like church for a long time because they wouldn't accept me as a single mom. And they told me I had to go get a divorce or go get an annulment. I said, I'm not going to get an annulment. I was actually married in a Methodist church. I have a child from that marriage. I don't believe in that. So there was a lot of baggage associated and a lot of lies that Satan loves to tell us. But I know what it's like to be at the end of your rope. And I know that, and I've had very sweet conversations with women who are pro-abortion, and they're like, well, how, you know, you've had one. How do you say that? And I said, because I have friends. I have dear, sweet friends that I know who wanted to adopt a baby. And what if somebody would have not had an abortion and given that child up and said, look, I'm going to choose, I can't have this child, but I will give it to you because you want a child. I can't have a child. I don't have it in me to raise a child. I don't, right?
Yeah. Well, I can imagine just if you're the pregnant mother and you know you're not going to keep the child, it does feel like, at least with the communication you get from medical science, it's like if you have an abortion, it's not a child yet. Whereas if you go through the process of 9 months, deliver the child and give it away, that seems like that's when you're actually giving away a child. Whereas I feel like the doctors now make it sound like, well, it's not a child yet. Go ahead and take care of it while it's just cells. And it's easier for the mom because you don't have that giving away. Like, oh, this really is a human.
Yeah, I'm going to just add this. There's a mourning that goes on with the loss. Now, when I miscarried that child, and God knows, he knows what's going to happen. He knows our future. He knows everything, right? When I miscarried that child, I was barely pregnant. But I knew I was pregnant because your body can tell when you're pregnant. And when I miscarried, I wept.
Yeah.
I wept and my heart hurt because, and I was married at the time. And my dad, I remember him telling me, he goes, baby, I know this isn't going to make sense. And he always had a way of saying things that were very brutally, truthfully honest. And they would hurt, but I needed to hear him. He said, I think God knows that that baby is better off in heaven than here. Now, the crazy thing, my dad said that
Oh
to
my
me.
gosh.
And I was like, okay, Daddy, whatever. You know,
This was after the abortions?
miscarriage. I'd already had
Miscarriage.
2 abortions.
Yeah, and then you had a
And then I
miscarriage
had a
after
miscarriage.
that. Okay.
And I was like, okay. But I always trusted my dad. I didn't always like what he said, but I trusted him. And fast forward, that was a nightmare marriage that thankfully, yes, that miscarriage, me miscarrying, that child is in heaven. And I don't look at them as clumps of cells. It is a human. It is a man and a woman coming together, and our bodies are creating through the grace of God, for he knitted us
Yeah.
Yeah.
in that mother's womb. But we make choices. And I want people to hear this. Sin is sin is sin. Sin. And so my sin was bad. He redeemed me. He restored me. And I look at it that he did take everything. And I look at where Mark and I are now and how he has restored that in my life. And not just where he gave me 3 little girls, right? Twins and an older daughter. That it's just, God he's wonderful in that. But that you're going to mourn.
Yeah.
When you make that decision, you know, I've heard women say, well, you know, it's not a big deal. Yes, it is. You can lie to yourself all you want. But it does cause emotional baggage. And you will mourn that loss.
So you believe that at conception, that's when it's human life, not at a certain
do.
point down the road. So the other question I had for you is, when you had the abortions, you weren't a Christ follower. Do you think, had you been a Christ follower, but your circumstances were still the same, you were still struggling, you still had a baby at home, do you think you would have made the same choice? Because I know there's Christian women who have abortions also.
For the same
same
very
reasons.
compelling reasons, the difficulty you're in.
You know, I don't know, because I do know this. So when I became a Christ follower here, right? That's when I believed in God. At one night in my life, at the end of my rope, I said, okay, God, if you're here, you'll get me out of this horrible, bad choice, number whatever, and I will follow you. When I chose to follow God and his word, really follow him and his word, I started coming to this church. And I started listening to biblical teaching. And nowhere in the Bible can you point to me, show me in the Bible where it says that it is okay for us to take that child. And so I can't say what I would have done, because I'm not that woman. And that woman, you know, I had some dynamics that even as a young Christian, I was not as strong to deal with things as I am now, or as even mature. I mean, I would come in here every time we had anything, small groups, kids. I mean, I dragged Joe to student ministry. We were in Focus. I was here every time something was open and we were teaching. I was here. So I was so broken and so ready to hear God's word that and I remember when Will talked about abortion, and we were in the black building, and I walked out of there just crying, and my poor son, he goes, Mama, why are you crying? And I said, it's nothing, son, because he didn't know.
Right.
And so I don't know what I would have done. And I can't, you know, every woman they're going to walk in these shoes. But what I want to say is there are families out there, they want children. There are, you know, I knew several people that they were married couples. They couldn't have children anymore for whatever reason. And, you know, maybe it's health reasons, you know. But they would have given a child a beautiful home, a beautiful experience. And if somebody could have or would have,
Yeah.
what a great thing that would have been for them. So I'm not going to condemn somebody. I don't want to judge anybody. I want them to know that, A, I would be here to talk with them, to love on them, to pray with them, but that it is a decision that will change your life. It will harm your soul. It will just scar your soul. And it takes years to overcome and finally forgive yourself. And I didn't forgive myself for many years, even after Mark and I were married. I think it was one day out, we had a women's event on the patio, and we had a young gal, can't remember her name. She's been gone for a while, but she was our missions gal for a while. And
Erica.
Erica, yes. Oh,
Erica
I love
Dunham.
Erica.
She's a great woman.
And she did not really know me yet, and we were talking. She said, well, tell me your story. She sat down. She said, tell me your story. And I gave her the Reader's Digest condensed version, and she said, oh, my gosh. She goes, I'm going to talk today about how the Lord redeems and restores everything that the locusts have destroyed. And she goes, can I just tell a snippet about you? And I said, yeah, that's fine. So, you know, I'm just there if somebody wants to talk
Yeah.
about it. And I'll pray for them and love them. I will never judge them because the
Yeah.
shoes I walked through it was tough. And I don't envy any woman who feels they have to make that decision, that's the only decision, because it's not.
It's hard. I feel like with just the messaging about like when human life, when it actually becomes human life. And I know there's a lot of debate on this, but one of the things that always kind of struck me as unusual is an abortion is not, you're not taking a life. However, if a woman is pregnant to any degree and somebody murders her, it's a double homicide. So I'm wondering, like, how do we marry those two ideas? If it's not a life when it's an abortion, how is it a life?
It's a great question.
You know? And the other thing that we were kind of talking about before this, like a lot of people think that if you aren't pro-choice, then you're not pro-woman. And you're extremely pro-woman. Yes. I'm extremely pro-woman. But I'm pro-life. But I don't know. It's a lot of people think that being pro-life maybe means that there's kind of a stigma around it, that you don't care about the mom. The mom is just they say you just treat the woman like she's like a vessel, like carrying this infant, as opposed to being an actual human being. Yeah. What do you say to that kind of stigma?
So when Mark and I married, I had a really good career. God had really started giving me a career to care for my son and us have a good life. And I meet my husband, Mark, and like y'all heard, we didn't date very long, and we've been married now almost 25 years this December. But I made a choice. And you're going to hear me say that a lot, it's a choice, right? And he came to the house, and I met him at this house that would become our house. And I said, I want to talk to you about something. He goes, what's that? And I said, well, I feel like I'm supposed to stay home and take care of the children. What do you think about that? And he said, I would love for you to do that. He goes, but I was never going to ask you to walk away from your career because I knew how much you loved it. So I made a choice. I stayed home with the girls, and I got to be with Joe the last 2 years of him in high school, which was wonderful for me as a mom. I never had that opportunity with him growing up. And then 14 years ago, at another time in our life, I told Mark, I said, I feel like I'm supposed to go back to work. He had left Dell. We had our own business at the house. And I said, you can stay home with the teenage girls. And they know I love them. They know I love them. And I got to go back to work. And talk about empowering women. Yeah. Remember the day I walked through here, I could barely afford to get here. I work a job where it is 100% commission. 100%. I don't get a salary, and God has blessed me so abundantly. And I will tell women all the time. I will tell anybody when they say, "Oh, well, I'm only going to be worth this much." I was that woman where they were only going to pay me X amount because they said this is all you're worth. And you think about that as a broken single mom, hearing what you're worth is barely minimum wage. How do you think that makes you feel? No, God says, you trust me, Linda.
Right.
Just trust me. Again, I'm going to redeem and restore everything that the locusts have destroyed.
Yeah.
And so I choose who I get to work with. I choose the time I work, and I've been so blessed by it. And I have a supportive husband. He supports me in what I do. But I think women have choices that they have to make, and they're hard or they're easy. And, you know, we make them every day, you know, whether you're going to have that extra Sunday, which I like chocolate. I'm going to just say I love chocolate. You know?
Sunday, D-A-E,
Yeah.
not D-A-Y.
Sunday.
There you go.
No, but my point is that we make choices, right, every day. And you can choose to make a good choice, or you can choose to make a choice that at the time may seem like the right answer, but it really isn't. It's going to affect you the rest of your life. And mine affected me for many years. And it's something that, yes, it's always going to be something that I carry, but not in a bad way. In a way that God says, look what I did.
Yeah.
And look what I can do. Look what I can do. People that knew me when I was in my 20s, they're like, thank you, Jesus, for our friend and sister Linda. Look what she overcome. So that is my thought on that. And yes, I do love to empower women. I got to volunteer at Reveal in the Christian Resource Center for a couple of years now. And I love empowering women and reminding them who they are. They are daughters of the King Most High. They are wonderfully and beautifully made. And life can knock them down, but they need to remember they're a princess in the kingdom of heaven. And they need to straighten their tiara, put on their battle gear, as Ephesians 6 says, and go into battle. And God's got them.
Yeah, I love that. That's a perfect note to end on because we actually went a little bit over, but totally agree. I love your heart for women. I love that you have the gift of mercy, like exponential. So thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing that. You know, I didn't want to take this into like the political side of abortion, but mainly just like the humanitarian side of it and how it affects you. But thank you. And Will, you just added a ton to this conversation.
I was great today. This is my best day yet by far. I'm very proud of my performance today. Thank you.
I'm very proud of you, Will. I love you, my friend.
It was easy.
So thank you guys so much. If you want like more information or resources, like ACF is here, even if we're not your church, reach out to us, acfellowship.org. We would love to be your community, whether you're here in Austin or elsewhere. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we invite you to join us again next week.